Y'all, I couldn't wait for our next Bad Boy Weekly Diddy update because what I just uncovered is seriously disturbing. Former employees of Diddy are finally speaking out, and the receipts they are dropping will make your skin crawl as they expose why working under him was absolute hell, from brutal working conditions to being forced to clean up the filthy, disgusting aftermath of his wild parties, with details far worse than anything you're probably imagining. Today we're breaking down Never Before heard stories from people who worked directly under him, revealing dark secrets they were forced to keep silent about for years while trapped under ironclad NDAs. And by the end of this video you'll understand exactly why they are finally breaking their silence. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments if you've ever had a boss from hell, because what these employees went through makes your worst job look like a paid vacation at a beach resort. And to understand how it got this bad, we have to talk about Diddy's parties, which for decades were seen as the ultimate Hollywood status symbol, an invite meaning you truly mattered. But what most people never knew is that there were actually two very different types of parties, with the public-facing ones enforcing strict all-white dress codes, flawless white decor, A-list celebrities, champagne flowing, and charitable causes creating a glamorous image everyone wanted to be part of. While behind the scenes, there was another side. Entirely, one the public never saw, and that's where things start to get truly dark. But then there were the freak-offs, and this is where everything turns dark and disturbing. These were private, drug-fueled events that took place after the A-listers and regular guests had already left. Think of it like this. The white party was just the appetizer, while the freak-off was the main course, reserved for only a select few who were invited to stay behind. And what happened at these freak-offs sits at the very center of the serious charges Diddy is facing today. Now, it's important to be very clear here, just because someone attended.
And afterwards, we got in his car, his driver picked us up, and we went to Catch in the meatpacking district, which had just opened. It had maybe been open a few months, maybe. So this is, the time when, with nightclubs where it's that bubble where it's impossible to get into and it's all celebrities in it and blah, 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 blah. And this was a time in my life where I was very young and very dumb, and I thought stuff like this mattered in any sort of way. And so we went to Catch, and we had one of the best tables, like in the back, kind of this corner area, one of the round bend cats. He got a table, like all our friends were there, a bunch of people from his circle, all my girlfriends. It was fantastic. It was the sort of thing, like on the right was a Saudi prince and his entourage. I mean, he was in his Western clothes, incognito, but we all knew who he was. And then on the other side was a banquet that was P. Diddy, Cameron Diaz. Does anyone remember? They were like hooking up back in like summer, fall 2011. And I feel like everyone's kind of forgotten about that, but whatever. Allegedly, I just know what I saw. And then Cuba Gooding Jr., which I'm pretty sure he is also a convicted rapist now. So in hindsight, this is kind of terrifying to think about. And then like Diddy's whole entourage. So it was like the banquet of their table was filled with like his guys, and they had all their bottles, and then a lot of security, and way more security than the Saudi, which is funny to think about maybe. And so we were ordering bottles, Saudi's ordering bottles, Diddy and co are ordering bottles. It's a great time. Everybody's, getting loose, partying. Cameron Diaz, sweetest person ever, absolutely drop dead gorgeous. What she was doing with Diddy, no idea. Cuba Gooding Jr., I didn't interact with him at all. He seemed sketchy and standoffish. And then, Diddy was like cheersing and like, ooh, he was like king of the club. He was loving it.
A white party does not mean they had anything to do with the freak-offs. Celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio, Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Kim Kardashian, and Paris Hilton attended white parties over the years, but that does not automatically mean they stayed for what came after. In fact, multiple people have said they were explicitly told to leave before the freak-offs even began. Some people also noticed the red flags early, 50 Cent being one of the biggest examples. He's been warning people about Diddy for over 20 years, and now we're finally starting to understand why. It all began with what sounded like a harmless invitation when Diddy called him and said, "Let's be friends, let's go shopping," which seemed normal, until Diddy added, "And I'll pay." It wasn't just what was said, but how it was said, like he was testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push, and 50 immediately picked up on that uncomfortable energy, calling it out ever since. That's why 50 Cent making a documentary now shouldn't surprise anyone. He's kept the same stance for decades. Now let's talk about what it was actually like to work for Diddy, because this part will make you grateful for any job you've ever complained about. Former assistants describe his empire as a place where the sun never set, and not in an inspiring way. Employees weren't just workers, they were extensions of his will, where sleep was seen as weakness and exhaustion meant you weren't committed enough. Imagine being dead asleep at 4 a.m. after working all day, only to get a call from your boss demanding a specific brand of water that isn't even sold in the state you're in, and if you fail to find it, you're publicly humiliated in front of everyone. Your mistake turned into entertainment. And it didn't stop there. Staff described something called the vibe check every time Diddy entered a room, where everyone had to instantly assess whether the energy was high enough to meet his standards, because if the vibe was off, the entire floor could explode into yelling, firings, and public embarrassment, all based on one man's mood. It wasn't about doing your job well anymore, it was about constantly managing his emotions, reading his mind, and maintaining perfect energy at all times, a mental toll that former employees say was absolutely crushing. And once you hear the work schedules and pay they endured, it only gets worse. So during the trial, one of Diddy's former assistants testified in court, and what he revealed was honestly shocking. This man was working more than 20 hours a day, let that sink in, sometimes 6 days a week, sometimes all 7. And for essentially giving up his entire life, he was making just $70,000 a year. When that number was said out loud in the courtroom, people visibly reacted because the workload compared to the pay made absolutely no sense. But somehow, it gets even worse. His workday didn't start when Diddy woke up, it started before that. Every single morning, the assistant had to wake up first and set the entire mood for Diddy's day, deciding what food he would eat, what music or TV he'd wake up to, and making sure everything was perfectly arranged before Diddy even opened his eyes. And then he stayed on call until 5 a.m. the following morning. Being on someone's beck and call from before they wake up until nearly sunrise the next day isn't just extreme wealth behavior, it's controlling, excessive, and honestly disturbing. So you might be asking, why didn't they just quit? That's a fair question, but the answer is much darker. Diddy was notorious for ironclad non-disclosure agreements, forcing many employees to sign NDAs before they even started working. These agreements banned them from ever speaking about anything they saw, heard, or experienced on the job. And if you tried to leave on bad terms or broke that NDA, the consequences were devastating. You weren't just cut off from Diddy, you were effectively blacklisted from the entire entertainment industry, labeled untrustworthy, a problem, someone no one should hire. Employees were trapped with an impossible choice, stay and suffer, or leave and lose everything they'd worked.
He said that he was working almost 7 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week, 20 plus hours a day, was making $70K a year. And yeah, and he said everybody in the courtroom said that too when they asked him how much he was making. And he said that like, he went through what his day was like. He was like, the first part of his day was he had to wake up before Diddy, and he would have to like set the mood that Diddy wakes up to. So like what the food is going to be like, what music or what TV he's watching. And I'm like, dang, to have somebody at your beck and call like that all day long, from before you wake up to 5 o'clock in the morning, that's rich.
It's only now, with federal charges piling up and public scrutiny growing, that this wall of silence is finally starting to crack. People are speaking out because they are no longer alone, and because legal protection now exists. And now we have to talk about the absolute worst part of working for Diddy, and I'm warning you up front. This part is genuinely disgusting. If you're eating right now, you might want to pause and come back later, because what comes next is hard to stomach. So there's a man whose ex-boyfriend worked as a property manager at one of the most expensive luxury hotels in Manhattan, a place frequently booked by Diddy and other high-profile celebrities for private events. And not every hotel employee knew what was really happening. Only a select group was chosen to handle these bookings, required to sign strict NDAs, and tasked with dealing with the aftermath. These wealthy clients didn't just reserve rooms or suites, they would book entire floors of the hotel and make highly specific requests, asking for lotions, toys, certain types of service staff, and other items the hotel was expected to provide. These parties didn't last a few hours. They went on for days. And here's where it turns stomach-churning. This property manager was responsible for cleanup after the parties ended, and he said the moment he walked into some of these rooms, he was hit with an overwhelming, pungent odor, sweat and bodily fluids everywhere. The walls were coated with thick substances, the beds were destroyed, furniture was covered, and the rooms were left in a state that was beyond filthy. Cleaning them took days and cost tens of thousands of dollars. So the next time you think about splurging on a 5-star hotel, maybe think twice, because you truly don't know what happened in that room before you. What's even more disturbing is that people in the luxury hotel industry have known about this behavior for years. This wasn't a secret. Workers had seen it again and again, but they couldn't speak up because of NDAs and fear of losing their livelihoods. And remember the assistant we talked about earlier, the one earning $70,000 a year while working 20-hour days? Part of his job allegedly included cleaning up after these freak-offs at Diddy's private properties. Imagine already being exhausted, emotionally drained, constantly walking on eggshells, and then being forced to clean rooms soaked in baby oil and other sticky substances. These weren't rare incidents, they happened repeatedly, in cities like New York and Los Angeles where that salary barely covers rent. The more you
was a frequent customer at a luxury hotel in New York City that my ex-boyfriend was a property manager of, and there are some crazy secrets. And if you guys think that the P. Diddy stuff is bad, just brace yourself because he is not the only high-profile client that was a regular. First of all, this hotel is one of the most expensive and luxurious hotels in Manhattan, and no, not all of the employees knew what was going on. It was a select group of employees that had to sign an NDA. Clients would book not just an entire room or suite, but an entire floor. They were asking for lotions, they were asking for toys, they were asking for certain types of service people, all different kinds. And P. Diddy was not the only person requesting entire floors of this hotel to be booked out for these parties. My ex told me that a lot of these people he did not recognize because they were just like businessmen who like to keep a low profile, but once in a while he would recognize a celebrity or a celebrity couple. And these parties would go on for days. And unfortunately, because my ex-boyfriend was the property manager, he was in charge of the cleanup of these parties. And let me tell you guys, the cleanup was not easy. In some cases, he told me that as soon as he would walk into some of the rooms, he would be met with the strong and pungent odor of man milk and derriere sweat. And that there would be thick layers of certain substances coating the walls, the beds, the furniture, everything. And that oftentimes cleanup would take several days and thousands of dollars.
think about it, the more infuriating it becomes. These employees were treated as disposable, as if their health and dignity meant nothing. And that brings us to Diddy's inner circle, where things get even darker. Former bodyguard Gene Deal has spoken about what he calls the dark energy behind the scenes, things no normal person should ever have to witness. To be close to Diddy, you had to prove one thing above all else, that you could keep secrets, deeply disturbing secrets that could destroy lives if exposed. Staff weren't just passive observers at these events, they were required to facilitate them, watching as ordinary gatherings transformed into something twisted, while never reacting, never objecting, never saying no. Former employees described the environment as cult-like. Once you were in, there was no halfway out, and leaving felt like betrayal to everyone else trapped inside. Some staff even described an unspoken don't look policy, rules about eye contact, invisibility, and behavior during certain situations. You were expected to be unseen, yet instantly available at all times, present and invisible at the same time. An impossible expectation that left people mentally and emotionally broken.
You know, we all have stories. Seriously, we all have stories. Mine is horrific and only 5 people know it. And I probably will never tell it. But since then I've been like, yep. And I also am very intimately aware that you tell your truth and you become victimized over and over and over and over and over and over. And mind you, I then interviewed him many times. I have a lot of stories, y'all. I've been in Hollywood for 25 years, maybe longer, 30. I got a lot of stories. Unfortunately, maybe I'll write a book one day. But it just is so traumatizing that women just want to live every day and feel safe. And when we revisit and revisit, we live in a state of victimhood. And nobody wants to live there. So for those who are like, why didn't you say something then? Because we just want to live. We want to be happy. And we really want to forget the trauma.